House Committee on Elections will come to order and the clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Smith,
Here.
Vice Chair Busey,
Here.
Rep Burrows,
Here.
Rep Capriglione, Rep Dayala,
Here.
Rep Manuel,
Here.
Rep Morales, Rep Swanson,
Here.
Rep Vo.
A quorum is present. As a reminder, anyone wishing to testify before the committee, please register at the kiosk located in the hallways outside the hearing rooms. If you require assistance in registering or testifying, please contact the committee staff. With regard to public testimony, due to the number of witnesses who have registered, and to accommodate all who wish to testify, I have a few important reminders to announce. We recommend and request that witnesses do not repeat testimony. We also recommend witnesses remain respectful of time and the amount of witnesses testifying. With that, the chair lays out House Bill 1631 and recognizes Representative Paul to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, it's good to see you all here this morning, ready to work on important legislation. This is a little quick bill, but I think it's important for the folks that work in our elections. This bill last session passed out of a majority of this committee, bipartisan bill. It's just something that kind of didn't get through at the very end, but we'd like to get it done. Current law requires that election day poll watchers serve a minimum of 5 continuous hours before they can leave or return to the polling place. This makes it difficult for people to even go to the bathroom or make a phone call, grab something to eat. So we'd like to go ahead and get rid of that 5-hour. It's also got some conflicting information in how the manuals work, how the Secretary of State puts it. So there's conflicting information about where it can be used and where it can be used. So we'd like to go ahead and get rid of it in poll watching, as well as the election day, as well as the central count. And I think we got some people here to testify for the bill, and without any questions, I reserve the right to close.
Questions for Representative Paul?
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And you've reserved your right to close. At this point, the chair will call Kathy Hagler.
Good morning.
Ma'am, thank you for being here today. We show you, your name is Kathy Hagler, and you're here testifying on behalf of yourself, and you're for the bill. Is that all correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you. You can
Good
go ahead.
morning, Chairman and members. This bill is long overdue. Texas has had poll watchers for a long, long time. The earliest language I could find online was from House Bill 1603 in 1997, and that bill was only changing the language to be gender neutral. Then in 2003, they added the 5 continuous hours, because before 5 continuous hours, you had to be there when the polls opened, and if you left at any time during the day, you could not come back, and that was the only rules. People were concerned about getting meals, picking up children from school, so they made the 5 continuous hours language. But if you looked at the bill analysis, it specifically said so that people can leave to eat, but it doesn't say that they can leave to eat in the bill. Then what happened later on in 2007, when we were putting in the restriction about not using cell phones within 100 feet of the polling place, they also added that the poll watcher can leave temporarily to use a wireless device, and it won't count against their 5 continuous hours. So now we only have one reason that a person can leave, where before we never had identified the reason they could leave. Now we have presiding judges who will not allow a poll watcher to return if they use the restroom, if they left to eat, if they took a smoke break, if they left to take some medicine. And it's really violating the purpose of the whole thing about the transparency of being a poll watcher. So remembering that there is no minimum hours of service required for the early voting ballot board, the signature verification committee, central counting station, or during the entire 2 weeks of early voting. It's just on election day is the time we have this rule. I really think there's no reason to have it at all anymore. And I've even asked Secretary of State about it before, and they kind of shrugged their shoulders about why we still have it. So I would just ask you to support House Bill 1631, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hagler, and I agree with you. It's an excellent bill, really needed, and I appreciate you taking your time to share your expertise with us. Nobody's got any better resume for this than you, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative.
I would just say to the public, just for your benefit, we have a lot of members who are out presenting bills in other committees and going back and forth and trying to conduct their business today. So I know that the vice chair is actually doing that right now. So I just, for your information, that's where we are. And at this point, the chair is going to call Mr. Ken Moore. Mr. Moore, good morning. I understand that you are Ken Moore, that you are here testifying on behalf of the State Republican Executive Committee, the Texas State Republican Executive Committee, and yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, members.
Well, excuse me, wait a minute. Are you for the bill?
I am for the bill.
You're for the bill. Thank you. All right.
Okay. Among the hats I wear, yes, I'm SRC, but I'm also the chairman of the Ballot Integrity Committee for the Missouri County Republican Party. Now, Missouri County, we use poll watchers, and, well, so does the other party. It's a kind of a hit and miss. Hi, how you doing? Everybody knows each other. Missouri County is not as, I'll use the word exciting, as our neighbor to the north, Harris County. We're more concerned about mistakes than we are, shenanigans so much, because in my opinion, our training could probably be much better than it is. But we do use poll watchers. Most of our poll watchers are retired persons. Many of them are in their 70s and 80s. And asking them to stay for long hours is a hardship. It's a great hardship. The rules we have that we're talking about putting in place right now have been in place for early voting for a number of years now, and so far it has not triggered the apocalypse. I would suggest that it makes no sense for us to have different sets of rules for early voting and for Election Day, and I would urge passage of this bill.
Thank you.
And ready to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir. The chair calls Eric Opiella. Eric Opiella. Okay. Let the record reflect that Mr. Representative Bowe is here with us. Mr. Chairman. Bowe, yep. The chair calls Ed Johnson. Morning, Mr. Johnson. How are you?
Morning. Good.
My understanding is your name is Ed Johnson, that you are here to testify on behalf of yourself and that you are for the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I think y'all have heard the highlights of it. The only thing I could probably add to it is this is a very old law requirement. Went back to when we just voted on Election Day and polling locations, and the intent of it was so that a poll watcher couldn't ID somebody or keep list of who's voted and who hasn't voted and sneak it outside to somebody. With technology nowadays, we have exit pollers standing there taking lists. You have all kind of, poll workers that can come and go quite often. So it's a rule that's simply not needed.
Members, are there any questions of the witness? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. The chair calls Christina Adkins.
Good morning. My name is Christina Adkins.
I understand that you are here on behalf of the Texas Secretary of State and that you are neutral on the bill. Is that
That's
correct?
Testifying on the bill as a resource if there's any
On the bill.
questions.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Well, I'm available if there's any questions that y'all might have.
Okay. Members, are there any questions of this witness? I guess not. Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you.
Thanks for being here. The chair calls Valerie DeBill. Valerie DeBill. We don't have an overflow room, do we? Okay, I'm just making sure if they're trying to make it, I'm cutting them off. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 1631? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Paul to close on House Bill 1631.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. You can see it's such a good bill that some people don't even want to come testify anymore on it. But it's something that's really needed. As you can see from the testimony, it's got conflicting information from early voting, election day voting, and we just want to make things consistent and really take care of some older people that might be wanting to use this. So we'd love to have y'all support.
All right, well, thank you so much. If there's no objection, House Bill 1631 will be left pending. Are there any questions, actually, of Representative Paul? All right, hearing no questions.
Thank y'all.
If there is no objection, House Bill 1631 will be left pending. Any objection? The chair hears none, and House Bill 1631 is left pending. You ready? Okay. It's my understanding, the chair lays out House Bill 357 and recognizes Representative Manuel to present the bill for Vice Chair Busey.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm laying out House Bill 357 for Vice Chair Busey. I'll go to the front door. Yeah, I can do that.
And if there's no objection, I'd really request that members of the committee lay out their bills at the podium.
None at all. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm laying out HB 357 for Vice Chair Busey. HB 357 is currently under law, permits Texans to vote by mail under certain circumstances. And during the last legislative session in 2021, Representative Busey worked on a bipartisan effort with Senator Hughes to create a statewide tracker to enable a voter to access and track the status of their ballot by the mail applications or a completed ballot. HB 357 would simplify the process of accessing the tracker and make it easier for voters to log by changing the required input. They are simply trying to swap out the DOB address and allowing the voter to enter just one identifier. This is a simple cleanup bill to make this easier. And thank you for allowing me to lay out this bill. I know if Vice Chair Busey, if anyone has any questions, Vice Chair Busey can answer that, but I will go ahead and reserve the right to close, Chair.
Members, any questions for Representative Manuel? Thank you very much. Hearing none, we'll proceed to public testimony, and at this point, the chair will call Alan Vera. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Vera. My understanding is your name is Alan Vera and that you are here on behalf of the Harris County Republican Party Ballot Security Committee and that you are on the bill.
That's correct, sir.
All right, go ahead.
This bill is intended to lower the bar for accessing the mail ballot tracker system. It proposes getting rid of the address requirement and not replacing it with any new factors. It will rely, therefore, upon the birth date as the only factor required to enter it in addition to the standard issues. While we agree that taking away this residence address requirement will open the door better, we wouldn't be so fast to rely upon date of birth. It's not a sure thing in Texas. For example, this past Sunday night, as I was drafting this testimony, there were 2,100 voters in Harris County on the registration rolls with a birth date of January 1, 1900. I won't explain how it happened, but unless you want to ask them the questions, it's true. These are the only voter registrations in Harris County that have the month, the day, and the year. Anyone whose birthday isn't actually January 1st, 1900, won't be able to use it to access it. Further, as part of our regular review of the 2.55 million voters registered in Harris County, we access public databases which include Texas driver's license data, among other items. Far too often, 1% to 2% of the time, we find that the date of birth in the driver's license does not match the date of birth on the voter registration. We work with election integrity groups in 12 other Texas counties. They've all had similar experiences, up to 2%. So, if you want to move ahead with this bill, consistent with the goal, we respectfully would recommend that whether by committee substitute or floor amendment, this very concise bill be expanded by at least one paragraph. We recommend the bill require the Secretary of State and the DPS driver's license division to undertake a project to identify discrepancies in voter dates of birth between the two databases. Any DOB discrepancies found in the database comparisons shall be communicated by the SOS to county voter registrars affected by the discrepancies. The SOS shall direct the county registrars to notify the voters with these discrepancies in writing, allowing them to either confirm or correct the date of birth information on their voter registration record. We believe that addressing discrepancies in DOB now will allow this bill to have an even better impact than simply removing the address requirement. Thank you for your time. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions, this witness? Mr. De Ayala.
If I understand it, I think what you're saying is you like the bill, you're fine with the bill, so long as there is this cleanup effort undertaken. Am I saying that correctly?
We're on the bill and not for it for two reasons. One, we're concerned that it's removing a set of ID requirements and not replacing them with anything. But beyond that, relying solely on date of birth, we have a problem. Texas has a problem, and it needs to be cleaned up before you move ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, members? Thank you so much for your testimony. Chair calls Emily French. Good morning. I understand you're Emily French, and that you're here on behalf of the Texas Civil Rights Project, and that you're for the bill.
That's right.
ahead.
I'm here to testify in support of HB 357. Last session, the Texas Legislature instituted a mail-in ballot tracker. This action improved the voting experience of many Texas voters, particularly those with disabilities, those over age 65, and those who are in school or on a work assignment far away from their home county. During elections, TCRP helps run the nonpartisan election protection hotline, 866-OUR-VOTE, and voters from all across the state reported using the tracker in 2022, and many folks we spoke to were happy to be able to look up the status of their ballot without having to call their counties. We supported the tracker in the 87th session, and we also support this effort to make it more user-friendly to voters. To look up their ballot in the tracker now, a voter has to input their name and address. Addresses have a lot of variation. The process can be complicated by apartment numbers, unit numbers, and whether you live on a street or a lane or a drive, something I myself am always forgetting. These difficulties don't exist with the substitutes in HB 357. There's little to no variation in a voter's date of birth, driver's license number, personal identification card number, or the last four digits of their social security number. We appreciate this effort to make mail-in voting more user-friendly, and we ask the committee to report this bill favorably. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any questions of the witness? Thank you so much. Chair calls Ed Johnson. Good to see you again, Mr. Johnson. My understanding is you're here testifying on behalf of yourself, that you are Ed Johnson, and that you're against this bill.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Yes, so I have experience with this. I probably spent about 20 years in the Harris County election departments with all that. And one of the part of the election code is you're not supposed to reveal who has applied for a vote by mail ballot. That's still, and so by what this bill's doing is loosening the log-on requirements to get in. You would be able to find access to who's applied for a vote by mail ballot. So that's part of the tracker. It shows who's mailed in applications, who's been mailed ballots, and under election code, that's supposed to be all kept very confidential. So I think we need to do the best job we can in keeping this information confidential. The information at the top, it's two screens. I wish I had a display, but you have on the Secretary of State's login, you have two screens. You enter your name, your date of birth, your driver's license, your social, and then the other side is your address. And it says very clearly at the top, it's the address on your voter registration. So they're actually hitting two different databases. They're hitting your driver's license database for name, name, birth date, and driver's license number, and they're searching the voter registration database for your address. So it may not be exactly typed like it is on your driver's license. It's typed like it is on your voter registration card. So this is a little security measure in ensuring that that person has both of those pieces of information that's looking this up, which I think adds to it. Things that other states have done is they actually send out, when they mail out the ballots, they have a security code, a logon code that the voter gets with their ballot that they can go and log on with too. It's worked really well in other states. That could be something that could be considered here. There would be an additional requirement, but it makes it more secure. And there's already a unique identifier that's put with your application when it is sent in, your Vote by Mail application. So the number and that all exists already in the database. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of this witness? Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Chair calls Stephanie Swanson. Good morning, Ms. Swanson. I understand you are Stephanie Swanson. You're here on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Texas and yourself, and that you are for this bill. Is that correct?
I am, yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, I am Stephanie Swanson. I am the issue chair of voting rights for the League of Women Voters of Texas. Today I will be testifying as a member of and on behalf of the League in support of HB 357. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. Thank you for allowing us to share the League of Women Voters Texas position on this bill. The League does support reducing the number of personal ID requirements needed to track your mail-in ballot. My mother-in-law cast a ballot by mail during the 2022 general election cycle. The new ID requirements for ballots by mail that were instated after the passage of SB 1 confused my mother-in-law, and she was concerned that she had made a mistake and that her ballot would not be accepted. I told her not to worry. It was still during the early voting period, and she had time to check with the county clerk's office to make sure that her ballot was accepted. I pointed her to the new ballot tracking system tool on the Secretary of State's website so she could check to see if her ballot had been received yet. Unfortunately, she confused the last 4 digits of her Social Security number with a previous phone number that she had, and she was just off by 1 digit. So the ballot tracker told her that it could not find her ballot. She called the county's clerk's office and asked what she should do. She was concerned that her vote wasn't going to count. They told her that sometimes it took a few days for everything to be processed and to just wait longer. It took my mother-in-law nearly 2 days before she realized the mistake that she had made with the numbers, and she finally was able to verify that her ballot had been received using the ballot tracker system. During the floor debate on Senate Bill 2 this past Monday, Senator Eckhart said that during canvassing, county clerks do find people that have voted twice, and 99.99999% of the time it ends up being someone who votes a provisional ballot because either they can't remember if they had sent in their mail-in ballot or if they couldn't verify that their mail-in ballot had been received. While my mother-in-law was finally able to navigate the vote-by-mail process correctly, there are clearly other people who cannot do so. Therefore, the League does support allowing voters to check their status of their mail-in ballot using their driver's license number, personal identification number, issued by the Department of Public Safety, or the last 4 digits of their Social Security number, as we feel this will help reduce confusion in the vote-by-mail process. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Hold on just 1 second. Are there any questions of this witness? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The chair calls Trudy Hancock. My understanding, your name is Trudy Hancock. Is that right?
It is. Yes, sir.
That you're here on behalf of the Texas Association of Election Administrators, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that you're for this bill?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay, go ahead.
House Bill 1382 in last session that was put forth by Chairman Busey, I think did a wonderful job in helping our voters be able to track their mail-in ballot to see if where they are in the process. We feel like the cleanup for this bill this time in House Bill 357 would be a great assistance to our voters. From a county standpoint, we saw voters get frustrated because the way the addressing works in the voter registration system is it's parsed out like the Postal Service is. Lots of people, you and me, aren't used to having to parse out their address according to what the postal system is. And that's what our voter registration system is. And so if a voter puts in something in the wrong box, say you don't put your house number in the appropriate box, then the voter gets a response saying that no voter was found, which starts another problem with, am I really still registered? You know, so it's a problem that we feel can be easily remedied by using the date of birth instead of the address, and we feel this would be a great cleanup to the original bill.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions of this witness? Thank you so much. I'd like to note that Representative Capriglione has joined us. Next witness, we call Christina Atkins. Ms. Atkins, you're Christina Atkins with the Texas Secretary of State, and you are neutral on the bill, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. I'm available to answer any questions or provide any clarification based on the information that's been presented so far.
Okay, well, I'd like to go ahead and ask you, you've heard some of the testimony thus far. Do you have a response to any of that that would maybe help us kind of understand what the for and against,
Sure.
what the issues are?
Sure. First, if I may, just to start with, I know Vice Chair Busey had worked on this during the previous session, and he had come to our office and asked some questions about, ways to make it a little bit more efficient. To reflect the testimony that was offered so far, we did hear about problems that were with voters getting into the tracker because of that residence address box. There's 3 required elements for authentication. It has to have the voter's driver's license, social security number, and residence address. That information, just to clarify, is all validated off of the statewide voter registration system. It's not checking it off of DPS, it's all checking with what's within the system. There was some testimony by Mr. Vera expressing concern about date of birth, that there are a number of voters that have a generic date of birth placeholder. If I could just provide a little clarification on that. You see that placeholder date of birth for voters that are typically older, that may have registered to vote before that was a requirement on the voter registration application, and so we don't necessarily have their date of birth. When he asked about trying to obtain that information from DPS, I did look. There was a bill in 2013, HB 2512. It added some information to the transportation code to give our office the ability to obtain some data from DPS. So we can look at that to see if that's an option. We currently utilize that authority right now to make sure that we're getting full 9s of social security numbers to make sure that our voter registration system has as robust information as possible. So that's something that we can look at to address that concern.
Members, any questions? Representative Swanson.
Thank you, Chairman. Did you get a lot of complaints about the address problem, or?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, speaking for our office, it was that particular box that was creating so many issues. And the reason why is because that is typically a data entry issue. And so what the voter's having to match is how their address is listed in the voter registration system. And it is very easy for somebody that's inputting that in the system on the front end to just make a mistake. And I'll use myself as an example. I used to live on West 51st Street. When I was trying out the tracker, the authentication to see how it would look for me, the word West was put in the wrong box in the voter registration system. And so I couldn't log in initially. And what we were hearing, and it was particularly some of our older voters that may have some limitations with their access to technology or use of technology, that were really struggling because they were not able to match that address perfectly. And I know Representative Busey did ask us about, what is an alternative to residence address? And date of birth is something that arguably is more secure because it's more confidential. And from a data entry standpoint, from a voter that's trying to use the system, might be a little bit easier to enter it in correctly without having to worry about people making a mistake on the front end.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? Representative Manuel.
So also, just to kind of ask this, so like, for instance, if someone, like, I would use my grandmother, for example, they changed the name of the street that she lived on kind of in between primary and general election. And so if she's been living in her home for 30-some years and that address would have changed, that could have been conflicting if she had recently just changed her voter registration, but it may have not been updated in the system. Could she have had a hard time tracking that ballot if it was just used by address?
So with that residence address box, it's going to look to what is currently in the voter registration system as of that day. And so depending on her situation and, you know, when she may have moved or when the address name or change took place, it would just depend on how that was listed in the system on the day that she's using it.
So this could, this could simplify the process of just, because it would still pop up a list of names, correct? If there are multiple date of births.
Well, right now, the authentication is date of birth, and what this bill is doing, as I'm seeing here, is that it's saying plus either a driver's license or the last four of your social security number. So it's not just date of birth that it's matching off of, it's matching off of other personally identifiable information that should be specific to that voter.
So it is still narrowing it down.
Yes. With the right combination of information, we can very easily identify the voter.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? I may have missed this a moment ago in your introductory statement, but you had heard what Mr. Vera had said, I believe, about a suggestion that he would like to see in the bill. Is that correct? You heard that? You understood what he said?
Well, his comment, the part that I took away from that was the concern about the date of birth and not having, and some individuals don't have date of birth in our system. And I think that there is existing law from 2013 where we might be able to work with DPS to obtain some of that information that could be used to be updating the system. I'd have to check on that, and we will look into that, but that might address his concern.
Okay. Any other questions, members? Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
The chair calls Valerie DeBill. My understanding is your name is Valerie DeBill. Did I pronounce that correctly?
That's correct.
And that you are here on behalf of yourself and that you're for the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Go ahead.
There was a reference made earlier to the voter assistance hotline, and I've been a volunteer on that for several election cycles. One of the primary things that we got calls about was the difficulty logging into the tracker. I'm actually particularly in support of making the change to make it either the driver's license identification card or the last four of the social. Currently, the system requires you to have both. And I actually ran into a voter who was 93 years old, and when she registered to vote however many years ago, her driver's license number was what was associated with her voting record. But when she was in her 70s, she no longer drove and switched to an identification card, which has a different numbering system. And that was never reflected in her voter registration record, because why would it be? And so the requirement for her to enter both pieces of data, the identification number and the Social Security, meant that she literally could not log into the system, and there was nothing the county could do about it because it was a state system. So it was very frustrating for her, and we ran into, that was a very specific circumstance, but we ran into that a lot, where folks had switched from a driver's license to an ID card or something like that, where your social doesn't typically change. And so giving the option to choose one or the other, I think, is going to be very beneficial for voters, in addition to removing the address requirement, because that was also very confusing.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you so much.
Right, thanks.
Is that it? Yes, sir. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 357?
Hi, I registered, but now I want to testify. My name is Dr. Susana Carranza.
Just one second, ma'am.
Can you say your name one more time? Last name is Carranza, Carranza.
Hold on just one second. We've got a few little things we have to do here.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So your name is Susana Carranza, is that
Yes.
right? And you're here on behalf of yourself?
Yes,
And you're for the bill, is that correct?
I'm for the bill.
Go ahead.
I live in a high-rise on I-35, and there are a lot of seniors that live in the high-rise. But my address, I'm a very computer literate, like I'm a chemical engineer, like, you know, I live and breathe spreadsheets and data and stuff like that. I usually have a very hard time entering my address in any electronic system because there is like 300 different ways. There is a street address. There is a direction for the freeway. The freeway, it's IH-35, sometimes it's called frontage road, sometimes it's called interstate, sometimes, and then there's apartment number or unit number. And that's true for anybody that lives along something that has directional. So removing the address is absolutely crucial because it is sometimes impossible to find yourself in something, you know, if you have a non-standard address. And please support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions of this witness? No, thank you so much. Is there anyone else that wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 357? If not, the chair recognizes Vice Chair Busey's surrogate, Mr. Manuel, to close. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. HB 357 would simplify the process of accessing the tracker and making it easy for voters to log by changing the required input. Again, I thank you for hearing HB 357, and I ask to close.
Thank you, Mr. Manuel. Any questions of Mr. Manuel? If there's no objection, House Bill 357 will be left pending. So there's no objection, the chair hears none, and House Bill 357 is left pending. The chair lays out House Bill 232 and recognizes Representative Swanson to explain the bill. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah, you get it.
All right. Thank you, Chair Smith and members of the committee, those who were able to be here. The amount an individual pays to run for state representative is codified in statute, and as we're all very aware, these changes need to be revised to keep up with the rate of inflation. Excuse me. The filing fee for office assists the Secretary of State, political parties, and our counties in defraying the cost of an election. Unfortunately, the last time the filing fee for office was raised was 2 decades ago. In 2003 by the 78th Legislature, which raised the fee from its original $600 to $750. House Bill 232 increases the filing fee from $750 to $1,250, an increase equal to the cumulative inflation rate since the last change. That would be 59.1%. The legislation does not change the ability to waive the entire filing fee with an appropriate number of signatures on a petition. It only updates the statute to meet the record inflation that our constituents deal with daily. If the legislature codifies the fee required to run for office, then we should do the right thing and pay a fair market rate. You will notice that HB 232 is only written to include state representatives. I chose only to update the fee for state representatives since that would affect me directly. I do not want to start raising the fees for other office holders without their consent. However, the legislation is written in a way where any amendment to increase the filing fee for another office could be added. I'm happy to work with any office holder who desires to amend this bill. Thank you for your time, Chair Smith, and my fellow members. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have and respectfully request the opportunity to close.
Absolutely. Any questions of Representative Swanson? Thank you, Bull. Appreciate it. Representative will proceed to testimony, and the chair calls Susan Stewart. Susan Stewart. Okay. James Dickey. Chair calls James Dickey. Good to see you, Mr. Dickey. My understanding is your name is James Dickey.
Correct?
You're here on behalf of yourself,
Yes.
testifying on behalf of yourself, and that you're for the bill.
Correct.
Go ahead.
The people of the state of Texas choose our candidates for elected office via the filings. The parties run those primary processes, and having been chair, I was responsible for that. It has been quite a long time since fees have been increased, and undoubtedly the costs of the state are significantly more than that borne by the candidates. I do believe that increasing the fees is appropriate, and in fact would fully support increasing them universally, as undoubtedly that would also not only reduce the burden on the taxpayers for those who wanted to participate in the process, but it would also serve as a test of the seriousness of the candidates, which in my experience can be helpful.
Yes, sir. Members, any questions, Mr. Dickey? All right, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
The chair calls, and I think I'm going to get this right, Arthur DeBianca. I'm sorry about that. I don't think I got that right. Can you tell me your name?
It's DeBianca, that was fine.
Oh, DeBianca. Okay. And Mr. DeBianca, are you you're here on behalf of the Libertarian Party of Travis County and yourself, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're against the bill?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I just want to make a couple of points about House Bill 232. One thing is I want to make clear that this will not only raise the filing fee for primary candidates, it will also raise the fee for write-in candidates, libertarian candidates, and candidates of other small political parties. All current members of the Texas House did participate in primary elections in 2022. I noted that in those primaries last year, 84 of the current members had 0 opponents, and 31 members had 1 opponent. And if you add those together, that indicates that over 75% of current House members had 0 or 1 opponent in the primary. Now, this does not sound like a crisis of overcrowded primary ballots to me. On the contrary, it indicates that it's currently too difficult for candidates to get into the primary, and I would respectfully suggest that the fee should be lowered, not raised. Just to sum up, this bill will harm write-in candidates, libertarian candidates, candidates of other small parties, and other candidates who wish to participate in the primary for Texas House. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Members, any questions as witness? Thank you for your testimony. The chair calls, Kevin Hale. Yeah. Just took a second. It's all right. Chair calls Kevin Hale. Hi, Mr. Hale. Your name is Kevin Hale, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Are you here on behalf of are you testifying on behalf of the Libertarian Party of Texas and yourself today?
Yes, sir.
And are you against the bill?
I am against the bill.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. The current legislative session of 88th session includes 58 House representatives who were elected without an opponent. If it were not for the Libertarian Party, 69 House reps would have been elected without an opponent. Originally, the filing fee was imposed on the primary party's candidates to help offset the cost of the primary cost to the taxpayers. A nice gesture considering that the cost to the taxpayers is a net $15 million every 2 years. And what do the taxpayers get for this $15 million every 2 years? They get to support two private political organizations who turn out 11% of the vote. Typically, 5 to 6% of each of the parties, establishment parties' base shows up for the very expensive primary elections. With so few participating, why not hold conventions at your own expense to choose your candidates just like you legislate we do? This way, the candidates can use that money on their campaigns and the taxpayers can keep the $15 million in their pocket. We are specifically against raising the cost to participate and fundamentally against filing fees being imposed on candidates who do not use the primary system. We, the people, shouldn't have to pay to participate in our government that's supposed to be for the people, by the people. We offer voters choices. We consider the filing fees to be federally unconstitutionally and against Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution, as it imposes restrictions on the right of all Texans to have a republic form of government. While practicing this speech out front, I had a conversation with DPS officer Mr. Harris. And in that conversation, we got a little bit deeper into this, and he told me I should include this following part. The biggest opponent in my campaigns for federal office isn't the incumbent. It isn't the gerrymandering. My biggest opponent isn't the gerrymandering because there's plenty of non-voters to win my election. I can get to the win number. My biggest opponent, sir, is apathy. Many voters don't believe that their votes even matter, that their vote doesn't count. And I tell them that not voting is giving away their voice, but they still resist not taking the 10 minutes to go vote. But I also experience the other side of that coin. In no less than 20 or 30 times during my election cycles while I'm out campaigning at a sign wave or doing block walking or even on social media, I have voters reach out to me, thank me, hug me, shake my hand, and for giving them somebody to vote for, because otherwise they would not participate in this program. So I'm asking you please don't pass this bill because it's already being rumored in the halls as the House Incumbent Protection Plan. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Members, any questions of the witness? Yes, sir, Mr. Manuel.
Hello. So I have a quick question. So do you think that this would, like you were saying, impede different voices from being a part of the political system and allowing people to be able to not have different sides of the political issue?
I have evidence to that fact. In 2018, the Libertarian Party put up 148 candidates because there was no filing fee for us. In 2022, we were only able to put up 68. Thank you very much for cutting our candidates in half, I guess.
Okay. That's just what I wanted to ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the question.
Any other questions, members? Sir, do you believe that there should be any filing fee?
No, sir. I don't think anybody should have to pay to participate, and I really wish that y'all would not put burden the taxpayers with a primary that only benefits your party. If you're going to do that to the taxpayers, then all of us should be able to participate in a primary. Green Party, Constitutional Party, Canary Party, Libertarian Party, Forward Party, all of them should be able to participate in a primary if you're going to make us pay a fee. Thank you very much.
Members, any other questions? Representative Manuel.
Okay, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here for
That's
just a
fine.
second. So what do you feel about the instance that not having some form of investment into the district that you're wanting to run in would put you in a situation where we know elections cost money. We know that there are things that happen during elections that we have to consistently change, which cost the taxpayers more dollars. I'm not for locking anyone out of the system, but kind of going to the point of what do you see as the incentive if you have nothing to lose except for the fact of, well, I just lost a race, but it will cost taxpayers more dollars to have more races consistently over and over, and even causing us to increase fees by having to change such laws as adding more mail-in ballots or doing different things of that. So not saying that I don't want people to vote more, but saying that it would increase that, knowing that we're kind of opening it up to saying hey, I just feel like running, I think I have a good platform, but you don't have anything that you've invested into the actual particular race yourself.
Isn't that the point of America? We the people, by the people, for the people. Whether or not I can afford to pay a filing fee shouldn't prevent me from representing people. Okay?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and the committee members for your time.
You bet. Chair calls Joseph Roberts.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Roberts. Your name is Joseph Roberts, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
You're here testifying on behalf of yourself and you're against the bill, is that correct?
That is correct.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Joe Roberts, and I was a candidate for the Texas House, a serious candidate, I might add, at this past electoral year. I was on the ballot to represent House District 100. I stand in opposition to this bill for the following reasons, in addition to many that were already mentioned. When we're talking about a $500 increase for the House, if you do the math on this, basically, we're talking not more than a couple of $100,000 that would be added to the entire process, which in the entire scope of this state budget, that's just a drop in the bucket from your perspective. From the perspective of candidates who are struggling to make those filing fees, to raise the money for those filing fees, that can be a hurdle that it raises the bar, makes it more difficult to overcome that hurdle to gain entry. In addition to that fact, as was mentioned, because this does only benefit directly the two primary parties, Republicans and Democrats, those who are seeking a nomination by convention in a smaller party, or those who are seeking an independent place on the ballot, there's no net benefit to them from this, and that money just goes straight into the coffers of the Texas Treasury. So they're out that money whether they win or whether they lose the election, or whether they even get nominated at their respective conventions in the case of convention parties. So what that does ultimately is that disenfranchises the voters. Was mentioned before. Like I said, I was a serious candidate. I did pay the filing fee. It wasn't easy in my case, and I don't think that the ability to pay for a filing fee just to enter the race should be a determinant of the seriousness of a candidate. Mr. Manuel, you asked the question, should there be some type of, indicator of one's seriousness? I think the fact that someone would be willing to get out there to raise that money, failing to pay a filing fee doesn't automatically put them on the ballot, either in the primaries or in convention parties. They still have to get their nomination through the process. Independent candidates have to still get a certain number of petition signatures. So there's still a demonstration of seriousness that is required. However, the pay-to-play aspect is something that should go. And if I had been elected, I would have filed a bill to eliminate the filing fees, at least for those who are not in a primary party, because their parties or their individual candidacies are not, they receive no net benefit from that. So for that reason, I would request that this bill be turned down, and feel free to ask me any questions.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony. Is there any questions from the membership? Mr. Manuel. Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Would you mind speaking to how difficult it is to get the amount of signatures?
Well, I did not run as an independent candidate. I actually ran as a candidate in a convention party. So I know from past experience with other candidates I know that it can be quite an expensive process, because ultimately you're having to hire petition gatherers, depending on even with volunteers on your end. Getting that type of ground support is rather difficult. Like I said, in my personal case, I gained the nomination through the convention process, so I did not have to worry about the signatures myself.
So still, again, investing in the district that you want to be in by going through.
Absolutely, and as a candidate myself, I was, like I said, I knew that it wasn't an automatic that I was going to get elected. Obviously, I had to go out there. I had to seek the votes, and you also mentioned the price. I don't think that my opponent would have been unopposed in the general election had I not run. I don't see there was a significant cost in adding one more blank to the ballot. which is ultimately the elections. In other words, the election was still held. The only difference is that that race was actually listed on the ballot with both of us as candidates. So I don't see any significant, expense that would be incurred by, eliminating these rates, these fees.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, sir. Any other questions of the witness?
Thank you very much. Take care.
Absolutely. The chair calls Ed Johnson. Mr. Johnson, good to see you again. You're Ed Johnson. You're here on behalf of yourself, and you're for the bill. Is that all correct?
That is all correct.
Go ahead.
And members here, I think, at least in my opinion, that Valerie Swanson's a great American. I mean, who else would give up? Who else would give up 2 months of their pay to run for an office? I will tell you, it's something. And to keep the democracy going in the state of Texas. Filing fees help me, the taxpayer. I don't have to pay as much for the primary. So it's been years and years since they've been increased. I think it's a wonderful bill. And thank you, Great American.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Members, are there any questions? Valerie, you have anything you want to say about that?
Thank you for your great recommendation there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Johnson, I just wanted to ask, and I apologize, Rep. Swanson, that I wasn't here. I was laying out a bill in another committee, as I think you were also. But this bill only goes to state reps. I'm just curious, do you support that we're only dealing with one office?
Well, it's a start. So, and the representative in her layout did say that she'd welcome, other officers coming on board. I understand it's hard to demand this of other officers, but I think this is a great starting point. She's putting it out there that we need to increase this, and if the Senate wants to jump on board when it's over there in the Senate, they can add it to it too.
I just think, we never want to give the Senate a free pass. Do we, do you think, though, that Republicans and Democrats should be treated the same way with filing as third-party candidates when it comes to we do our elections differently?
No, yes, I do, because there is still, working in the election world in Harris County, there is still a tremendous amount of work, even for third-party candidates, that has to go into putting together a November ballot. You have to vet that none of these people that are on their primary have, voted in the Republican or Democrat, because, it's one man, one vote. You have to ensure all that data. That's a lot of research that goes into that to make sure. So it is an expense. Even though they're not holding a primary, they're holding a caucus, but there is still a lot of work that goes into this.
I agree with you because, I don't agree with you on your answer. I agree with you that there is an expense that they have the general, but I guess I'm getting at, because they don't have the primary, do you think it's fair that they pay the same rate when we're running 2 elections and they're running a convention and then an election?
Well, so, yes, I do, because, you have to pay that filing fee somewhere to get onto the ballot.
Sure,
and
onto the general ballot.
Onto the general ballot. So, that would logically fall before they go have their caucus meeting.
I guess my fee is paying for the primary and the general, and that's what I'm trying to get at, with their cost being the same.
I think that this is, even at currently, it's dirt cheap. At $750, at $1,200, it's still not a great expense. If you're representing the state of Texas for $1,200, if you can't make that bar, I really don't know that you would have any chance of holding an office in the state of Texas.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that sentiment. I just want to make sure everybody that wants to run has access, but I appreciate your feedback. Thanks.
Well, they still have the petition filing fee. They can do this without paying. They can come up with a petition. Any person can to get put on the ballot.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Members, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair calls Joe White. Good afternoon, sir. My understanding is your name is Joe White,
Yes, sir.
that you're here on behalf of yourself,
Yes, sir.
and that you are against the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, go ahead.
I will try not to ramble. What I'd like to say, the sentiments have already been expressed very well by Mr. DeBianchi and Mr. Hale and Mr. Roberts. The intent, as I understand it, for these fees initially was to help fund primary elections. And the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the smaller parties do not hold primary elections. They hold conventions, which are not run by the state. Leaving aside whether the state should be involved at all in the selection process for parties to put forward a candidate. Because the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, the smaller parties do not have any primary convention activity. All their expense goes to their own convention processes. This money does not go to that. It goes to help fund the two established parties, fund their primaries. As was pointed out earlier, Mr. Hale, so many of the representatives today had no primary opposition at all. And according to the KXAN report this fall, 40%, almost 40% of the representatives were elected unopposed. We don't have a problem of trying to have too many ideas out there. If anything, we have a dearth available to the voters of the state of Texas. We should not be trying to make it harder for people to offer alternatives to what is being offered. We need to make it easier, and therefore I urge you to reject this bill.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony. Are there any questions of this witness? There's none. Thank you so much for your testimony. And at this point, the chair would call Clark Patterson. Good afternoon, sir. Is your name Clark Patterson?
It is.
Are you testifying on behalf of the Libertarian Party of Texas and yourself?
Yes, sir.
And are you against the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to just, no point in me going over the great points that have just been made a few minutes ago. I would just like to vehemently oppose this bill for the primary reason that we do not have a competitive election system here in the United States. The Founding Fathers could never have foreseen computer programs that could draw the lines to where there simply is no competition. Now, I have run as a third-party candidate 5 times in the last 10 years. None of those elections were competitive. The last time it was against Congressman Doggett here in this very district, District 37. Congressman Doggett won with 76% of the vote. His Republican opponent, his other major party opponent, Jenny Garcia Sharon, received probably 25%. I believe, I can look up the numbers later, of course. We can all do that. I don't believe the Republicans gave her very much money or very much support because, again, the lines were drawn to where they're just not competitive. So I guess I don't see this bill as being either necessary or desirable because, I mean, there's just no competition. Cook Political Report, this last 2022, claimed that there was going to be one congressional election in the entire state of Texas out of 38. They claimed one would be in play, as they call it. In fact, in that race, the winner won with 55% of the vote. So again, Representative Swanson, I'm not sure what your race was, but I'm going to guess that you didn't have a very competitive election in your last race, or maybe the last couple of races you've had. So again, I just don't see why this bill, why we would have put a chilling effect on competition in our election process. It just makes absolutely no sense at all to me. So you can, if you'd like, Representative, you can tell us what your final results were last session, but I'm willing to bet you almost everything I own that you won with over 55% of the vote, because that's just how our non-competitive election systems are now. I mean, you're perfectly willing to tell the public what your election results were.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any other statement you'd like to make?
No, sir.
Okay. Members, any questions of this witness? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Last registered witness, I believe, is Christina Atkins. Last testifying witness that I show, I'm sorry. You're Christina Atkins, and you are testifying on behalf of the Texas Secretary of State, and you're neutral on the bill, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Available for any questions you might have.
Members, any questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Atkins.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 232?
If the chair would like to indulge me on an issue that the representative brought up, but I can do it in writing if you prefer.
Yes, ma'am. Hold on just one second. Have you registered?
I have. I didn't register to testify.
You did not
I
register to
can do
testify?
that in writing or
What is your name?
Elizabeth Miller.
Hold on just a second, Ms. Miller. Thank you. Ms. Miller, if you'd like to come up and testify, you sure can. Your name is Elizabeth Miller, is that correct?
Correct.
You're testifying on behalf of yourself,
Correct.
and you're against the bill.
I am.
Go ahead.
To elucidate on your questions, the Supreme Court has spoken to this issue and said you shouldn't have a financial barrier to being on the ballot. Understandably, it shouldn't be a test of expense, and I can assure you that $1,250 is a lot of money to a poor person, especially when they're contemplating a job that pays $7,200. And the Supreme Court has said you can do it for two reasons. One, to limit the costs of to defray the costs of primary, and this applies to convention parties. And that matters to both reasons. The second is to get rid of the fluff on the ballot, if you will. I don't know the delicate way of putting that, but unserious people, I believe another speaker spoke to. And that's a problem here too. That reason doesn't apply here either, because with convention parties, a lot has happened to demonstrate the seriousness already. First of all, convention parties, on their own dime, paying for their own conventions, have had to establish ballot access overall. And that requires getting a lot, 5% on the in a statewide race, which I can assure you is very difficult to do if you're not a Republican or a Democrat. So that's how these convention parties, establish ballot access to begin with. So they've already demonstrated their seriousness, and they've gotten the nomination of their party. They've gone to our party, which is not as big as y'all's, but a party of some size, and gotten the nomination. They've already demonstrated their seriousness. They've already spent a lot of time and effort. These fees don't go to defraying the primary costs. They're about getting us to pay for you. You know, we pay for y'all's primary as taxpayers, but we don't get to participate in it. We pay for our own convention. So if we want to make it even, y'all pay for our convention while we're paying for, you know what I mean? So none of the two reasons will apply. Will a court strike it down? Probably not, frankly, because all the judges are Republicans and Democrats. And while I understand why people would I understand why Democrats and Republicans want to limit competition. That doesn't make it right. While I understand you want us to pay for your costs, that doesn't make it right either. So I appreciate the committee's time. If you have any questions, I'll shut up.
No, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time coming up and taking part in the process, and I appreciate your testimony. Members, are there any questions for this witness? Mr. Manuel.
Could you speak to the difficulty it is to get signatures? I mean, I know that you've explained a lot of it very well, but the signature, because I'm using it as an example. I had someone who was running as an independent candidate, and I know that was one of the reasons that he ended up not being on the ballot, because the difficulty of signatures.
We have people in my party who are more expert in this, but just to give you a general answer, I know a lot of people up here say, well, you can get the signatures. But if we can just be real for a moment, everybody knows that's hard to do, that you need several times more than is required, because somebody from a big party is going to go through them all and try to get rid of them all, work overtime on it. And so what you have to do is pay somebody who gets the signatures to get them, and that costs a lot of money. Okay. More than the fee typically. The other thing is the people who have to sign can't have participated in the primaries. So that narrows it down. Also, the window is narrow. So there's no way to do it within that time period and get the net without paying somebody.
Perfect. Thank you so much for explaining that.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions of this witness? Thank you, ma'am, for taking
Thank you
the
for
time.
indulging me.
Absolutely. Is there anyone else here who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 232? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Swanson to close on House Bill 232.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow committee members. House Bill 232 just ensures that the fee to assist the state in defraying the cost of an election is updated to reflect 2 decades of inflation. Again, candidates would still have the ability to gather the required signatures and pay absolutely no filing fee whatsoever. 500 signatures to run for state representative is an extremely low bar. You can easily get that many in a few hours at a parade or farmer's market. I have personally proven this by helping judicial candidates get their required signatures. Therefore, there is no financial barrier to filing. Thank you for your time, and I ask you for a favorable recommendation out of committee.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
If there is no objection, House Bill 232 will be left pending. I hear no objection. The chair will then have House Bill 232 left pending. The chair lays out House Bill 1635 and recognizes Chairman Burrows to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman Smith, Vice Chair Busey, members. Appreciate the opportunity to lay out this very simple and good bill. Purpose of the bill is very simple. It is to ensure that the primary voters of the state of Texas are the ones who decide who the nominee is on the ballot. It retains all of the statutory reasons why somebody can be removed from a ballot, but does not allow a party to go beyond that and create new, perhaps artificial reasons for doing so. It also clarifies that the county chair is the one who supervises the elections and not the executive committee, and makes sure that a party does not adopt its own rules on presidential electors inconsistent with what we already have in place or the national party has in place. Members, I will tell you that I've been working a little bit on a committee substitute. Ledge Council is a bit backed up. It is not ready here today, but I think that's good. It'll give me an opportunity to listen to any of the testimony or concerns today, and if there are any, we can include that before asking y'all to vote on it. I'm happy to attempt to answer any of your questions today. I will tell you, though, there's probably 1 or 2 witnesses here that can, get into the weeds, so to speak, on some of the different statutory concerns and why the framework works as it is. But with that, if there are questions, happy to answer. If not, I'll reserve my right to close.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, any questions of the chairman? Thank you.
Thank you all.
The chair calls Cindy Castilla.
I did not believe that I was the first to sign up. Sorry.
Hold on just 1 second. I understand, Ms. Castilla. We appreciate you being here. You are Cindy Castilla, is that correct?
I am.
And you're testifying on behalf of the Texas Eagle Forum and yourself, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're against the bill?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
All right. This is government intervening in party politics. We already have some of that. The Constitution never mentioned parties. They didn't really even exist at the time. They formed for the ratification of it, but they are private entities. So I don't like the idea of the government making rules for private parties. The part about the county chair being in control over the executive committee. I mean, the executive committee is part of the county party, and they're leaders, and they're important. I don't know how other parties structure it, but in my party, we prefer the most local of control in most all circumstances. So I'm just struggling with why we want to do this, why we want to have the government take anything away from a private entity that is operating well. I just think it's not the business of government to do this. I had some more. I was still writing what I was going to do. In section, Yeah, H. Give me a minute here. The candidate in a general or runoff for a primary election may not be declared ineligible for any reason other than what's specified. A party locally may know a whole lot more about a person who is claiming to be affiliated with the party, and they may not be part of the party. And so this is not the government's concern, it's the party's concern. And so I'd like to leave it with the party. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your testimony. Any members have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. The chair calls James Dickey. Good to see you again, Mr. Dickey.
Good to see you.
Your name is James Dickey,
Yes.
and you're testifying on behalf of yourself, is that correct?
Yes.
And you're for the bill?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. I've got some experience with ballots and filings and candidacies, having been a county chair and state party chair. And I have advocated for less limitations on how parties can have self-control. And for example, the Texas Code specifies the length of term for the party chairs. I think that's probably unnecessary and not an example of where the state law should infringe on freedom of association for the party members. Ballot access, however, especially when, in my case as county chair, I had to accept filing for people to oppose me. Ballot access is a case where I believe it is appropriate for the state. The state does have an issue in making sure that the only thing worse than the state dictating to the parties on what to do would be to have a renegade chair individually deciding what people were allowed to do. And I therefore support this for what this does. I do have one case that I want to be sure y'all keep in mind. I have read the law carefully. I'm not an attorney, but as far as I can tell, it would not necessarily have prevented what needed to happen from happening, but I had a case as state party chair where a congressman had resigned. That congressman had already filed to run for re-election. That congressman withdrew, but did so past the deadline the Secretary of State had mandated. But before my deadline for submitting the list of candidates to the state, I chose not to submit his name, accepting his resignation, his withdrawal after the filing date. Now, that's not preventing him from ever filing. That was accepting a withdrawal. But there was, not surprisingly, a lawsuit that came after that where the Democrats were trying to force us to accept this not appropriate candidate on our own ballot, which fortunately we won fairly quickly. But I would be careful to make sure that any change like this about ballot access does not prevent an appropriate situation like that from being handled properly in the future.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Chairman Burrow.
Yeah, James, I just wanted to first say hello and tell you I always enjoyed working with you when you were the state party chair. We had great meetings and always appreciate you now and the opportunity to talk to you. I'm working on a committee substitute. If we can find, some language to help address that particular concern that you've brought to me, love to do that, and certainly we'll continue to work with you on that. But, good to see you here today for sure.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Chair calls Kathy Hagler. Yes, ma'am. You are Kathy Hagler.
I am.
You are testifying on behalf of yourself,
Yes, sir.
and you're for the bill?
I'm for the bill.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman and members. I've been a grassroots activist in the Republican Party since 1992. I was an SREC for 9.5 years, the state party secretary for 2 years, and a county chairman for 5 years. I've attended every state convention since 1992 and 3 national conventions. I've been on the state platform committee twice, several other committees once, and the rules committee 4 times, most recently in 2022. And the only reason I'm telling you that is to establish over 30 years of volunteerism at the highest levels of the Republican Party of Texas. At the 2022 Republican State Convention Rules Committee, a very obvious division quickly emerged early in the week of our deliberations. One side wanted all references to the Texas Election Code or any other Texas law source, decoupled from our party rules, while the other side, my side, wanted to keep all of the law references in. You just can't do that without quickly drifting into chaos and anarchy. But we lost that fight. The folks like me who wanted to keep all the law references in were grossly outnumbered. So some of the issues that we argue about in our committee. One, can the RPT or the state party require a county chair to reject a potential candidate based on a party rule that is not part of the election code? More specifically, can the state party require a county chair to reject an application from a Republican office holder who has been censured by their county party or the state party? Or can the Republican Party of Texas require a county chair to reject an application from a Republican candidate who did not complete and turn in a party questionnaire? Another example of what happens when you take the election code out, the election code 171.029 says that a precinct chair can be removed for abandonment of office after missing 4 consecutive meetings, but the Rules Committee, after they took the reference to the law out, changed the party rules to say they only have to miss 2 meetings to be able to be removed from office. So House Bill 1635 reels in that rogue partisan extremist who wants to micromanage every part of the political process that is not specified by law. This bill allows a political party to make its own rules for selection of a president or vice presidential nominee, which is appropriate, and it tightens the loopholes that the control freaks are trying to drive a Mack truck through. So I ask you to vote for House Bill 1635.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions of this witness? Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
The chair calls Robert Green. Good afternoon, Mr. Green. Are you Robert L. Green?
Yes, I am, sir.
Are you here testifying on behalf of the Travis County Republican Party and its Election Integrity Committee for Legislation and yourself?
Yes, I am.
And are you against the bill?
I am against the bill. I have some concerns about it. There are good parts of it and there are bad parts. Anyway,
go ahead.
I've been in a precinct chair and election judge for about 14 years now, here in the middle of what I call the blue atoll that is Travis County. I'm a 6-time delegate to our Republican Party of Texas State Convention and the chair of the Travis County Republican Party's Election Integrity Committee for Legislation. The biggest problem with this bill is its seeming priority. The problem with our elections isn't with the average citizens who volunteer their time to serve as precinct, senatorial, and state convention delegates, county executive committee members, as election judges, or ballot board members. The fact that the Republican Party of Texas is solidly conservative is something of which we are proud, not something for which we should apologize. So, instead of attacking the RPT as this bill does, legislation presented here should focus on how we can run fraud-free elections and ensure that to the best of our ability, that Texas has the most secure, transparent, and accurate elections in the world. My biggest concern with HB 1635 itself is the primary priority being given to its passage. Why is one of the first bills up in this for public comment in the Elections Committee one that reduces the power of our conservative grassroots and the RPT? Shouldn't the first bill out of this committee be the companion to SB 2 that will restore historic felony penalties for knowingly casting an illegal vote in person or by mail? As an aside, there is just no way that Soros-sponsored DAs in our largest cities are going to prosecute Texas election code violations if they are just misdemeanor offenses. I would ask all of you, what's more important, making our elections more secure and transparent or addressing frivolous concerns from some members that the Republican Party of Texas is too conservative? My committee and the TCRP believe that this bill is very unfair to Texas Republicans, and it may well be unconstitutional because the very first section of the bill as filed violates freedom of association by mandating that the party associate with those who may not share our principles. Sections 2, 4, and 5 may have unintended consequences because they restrict the RPT to rulemaking solely for the presidential and vice presidential primaries. While this section references public office, some might interpret it to preclude RPT's Rule 8A, which requires candidates in the primary for county chairman to get signatures from precinct chairman to qualify. This rule was passed because of a loony former Travis County chairman named Robert Morrow, and the RPT wants to make sure that this bill does not inadvertently prevent the party from enforcing Rule 8A. We also believe that the county's executive committee members should play a role in administering the primary. The last sections of this bill would repeal authority that the executive committee has over the primary or transfer it to the county chairman. Given that many of our election workers are precinct chairmen, we think that county executive committees should have some authority to supervise their primary elections. That said, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir, for taking the time.
These are concerns that I think that some of these things might be able to be addressed in a committee substitute.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Members, any questions? Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Next witness is Dwayne Wright. Yes, sir. Your name is Dwayne Wright, correct?
Yes.
You're here testifying on behalf of yourself and, let's see, I have you registered as for yourself.
Yes.
Okay. And you're for the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead.
My name is Dwayne Wright. I've been a county chairman for 8 years in San Jacinto County. They let us come out from behind the pine curtain every once in a while. Also, I'm the executive director for the TRCCA, which is the Texas Republican County Chairmen's Association. Our main charge is to educate, train, and support county chairs across the
Are you
state.
testifying on behalf of yourself? Or?
I'm just testifying on myself, but I wanted to kind of give some of the background of what we do, what I've done.
Thank you.
I support this bill because I believe the election process should be objective and not subjective. Obviously, the Republican Party and the Democrat Party's take on this, if we're going into partisan rulemaking, is going to be probably different. It's probably not going to be the same. And for the people that argue, we need to keep the ballot pure or whatever, I mean, they could think about the fact that there might be a squishy Republican chair somewhere that denies the hyper-conservative candidates access to the ballot as well. We've had problems in the past. Bandera County, perfect example. When you take party rules and you misinterpret them and you funnel them into the way the local parties are run, it can cause major issues. We're talking felonies in some cases. So when we teach chairs, we try to keep it objective. We focus on the rule of law, the Texas election code. It makes it more simple. Because I guess a lot of you probably don't know, the typical turnover for the Republican Party county chairs is 60 to 75 per term, which is almost a third of the county chairs could actually turn over. So we're constantly having to educate on rules and rules and rules and rules. And if that bar keeps moving, it is really, really difficult. It's difficult to manage. The clear, concise, you look at the four corners, you accept the document, that protects county chairs as the local filing authority from having to make these subjective choices. And so that's why I support the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Members, any questions? Thank you so much. Chair calls David Luther. Good afternoon, sir. Your name is David Luther, is that correct?
It is, Mr. Chairman.
And you are testifying on behalf of the Texas Republican Chairmen's Association and yourself, is that correct?
I may be overstepping, but I think so, yes.
And that's a yes?
Thank you, Mr. Executive Director.
Is that a yes? I want to make sure the record's clear on your testimony.
I hope it is now.
Okay, well, we're going to try this one more time, all right? Is it true that your name is David Luther?
That is very true.
And are you here today testifying on behalf of the Texas Republican Chairman's
Yes, I am.
Association? Well, hold on just a second.
Okay.
Are you here today testifying on behalf of the Texas Republicans Chairman's Association and yourself?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I am.
Thank you. And are you for the bill?
I am for the bill.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
I got in trouble once for cutting off a judge, so I mean, you know. Mr. Chairman, members, I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today. Chairman Burrows, I appreciate your leadership on this bill. Let me say this, I know this it might be somewhat redundant, but county chairs are the gateways to the primaries, which are the gateways to the general election, with no offense to my friends in the Libertarian Party who don't use the primary system. I'm the training director for TRCCA. My job is to go out and train county chairs. And I've done that now for the better part of 2 years, traveling all over Texas with the intent of training county chairs to make them better at what their jobs, particularly, and by the way, the county chair's job are two things: to hold the primary and then to advocate for our party in the general election. Unfortunately, the Republican Party of Texas has taken a position that our job should be something completely different. And I object to that. The county chairs who've contacted me consistently have had questions about the idea of them being put in the position of having to limit ballot or access or reject applications for ballots. This is not a fair burden to place on these volunteers across the state of Texas. The average county chair has very limited political experience. They're not former representatives, former senators that decided to become county chairs. No, they're, as Kathy Hagler pointed out, we're grassroots volunteers. We've come up through the system. We're here to support the party and our nominees. We're not here to make decisions on whether nominees should be nominees. Now, there's been a lot of talk about affiliation. Once that application is filled out, that person affiliates. Now, the primary is for the candidates to establish who best should represent the Republican Party. Taking away that contest is not fair. I believe that if someone decides, or as has been pointed out many times, if a Democrat decides to file in the Republican primary, a county chair should not be given the responsibility of saying, oh, I'm sorry, you're a Democrat, you can't be in our primary. That is for the voters to do. And that's what I want to highlight today. This bill allows for codification of something that should be normally, or should be accepted already. It's somewhat clear to me, at least in the election code, but there are people who don't want that. What this does is it allows the voters to continue to make decisions in primaries as to who they want to represent them in their party in the general election. I don't think we should be doing anything by rule to take that away. I could go on forever about why I think this is going on, but there is no downside to this, and I'm sorry I disagree with everyone that has come up here and testified against this. Frankly, leave the county chairs out of this decision-making. Let us do what we do. We'll accept all applications. Let the voters decide who the nominee should be, and then we go on from there. We have a primary election, and that's what it's for. I'd like to close by saying, Chairman Burrows, if, as you are looking to substitute language in this, the Texas Republican County Chairs Association, as we have a great vested interest in this bill, we would enjoy and be very appreciative if we could be somehow allowed to help you along with that process if you had the need for us. So we are here to help if you need it. Otherwise, I thank everyone for your time, and obviously I'm happy to answer any questions unless they are real complicated, like who am I representing?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time and your testimony. Chairman Burrows.
I'll just tell you, I echo the comments you said. You articulated the purpose of this bill probably as well as, anyone I've heard done. So thank you for being here today, and my door is very open. If you see some tweaks and things that we can help support you guys, we're here to do that. I'll reach out on anything before we actually publish this to you and your staff in particular. Thank you.
That is very much appreciated. Thank you, gentlemen. And
No more questions? Okay, thank you, sir. Chair calls Joe White. Good to see you again, Mr. White. You are Joe White, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You're here testifying on behalf of yourself, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you're against the bill?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
As was mentioned by the first speaker, should not be the state's responsibility to police what's going on in the parties and how they select their candidates. Setting aside for right now, again, that not all parties use the primaries to select their candidates, and whether the state should be involved at all in the primary process. Just addressing the very first section of the bill, or about affiliation, that they're, it gives an example from when I was a freshman at Rice. A group of right of center students descended upon a Rice Peace Forum, which was all about what was going on in Central America at the time. Outnumbered the members who were there, took over the meeting, and substituted their own constitution for the group that was not quite with the intended purpose that the founding members had, which was met by a lot of amusement by people who didn't really care and said, hey, look, they've followed the rules. But the people who founded the group were understandably a bit upset. That's not as, a student group is not as far-reaching as parties in their elections and who is on the ballot. But determining who can affiliate should be, it goes to our core as our freedom of association. And saying that we cannot tell who can affiliate with us or not is wrong. To become a member of the Libertarian Party, you have to sign an affidavit saying you do not support the use of force to change our laws and our system of government. By the terms of that first section, though, if someone espouses those views, we can't keep them out of the party. But that goes to the core of what being libertarian is. It's all about being consent. This would take that away. And organized groups, not just of, I won't even go into particulars, but larger groups in urban areas could take over the party there that is of a minority status very easily, just by having a bunch of people sign up and say, hey, we're here to be your members now. That does not provide for a good discussion of values if somebody antithetical to the group's purpose comes in and just takes over, which that wording would allow. So I would urge you at least to reconsider that section, not the entire bill.
Anything else, sir?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you, Mr. White.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. The chair calls Susan Johnson. Good afternoon, Ms. Johnson.
Good afternoon.
I understand. Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. My understanding is that your name is Susan Johnson. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You're testifying on behalf of yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that you're for the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all of your commitment to being part of this committee and working on this. This is really important to me. My name is Susan Johnson, and I am a Montgomery County Precinct Chair, and I do support this bill. The main points that I would like to make, when you chose to run for the office you are currently holding, the requirements to file as a candidate in your primary were very clear. How would you feel if precincts in one of the counties in your district decided that they did not want you to run against their endorsed candidate? This isn't a partisan issue. This is a voter rights issue.
Voters should have the opportunity to consider all candidates who would like to run for office if they meet the basic criteria for filing. The possibility of a group of precinct chairs voting to prevent a candidate from being allowed to run isn't theoretical. It's a reality in Montgomery County. I wanted to play a podcast for you, but wasn't able to do that. So instead of providing a transcript of a conversation that was recently played in January of this year, the transcript of the conversation says, I'm going to read that to you in just a moment, but the candidate that they're referring to exclude is a current precinct chair in Montgomery County. He's a former Texas Ranger and currently serving as captain in Montgomery County Constable Precinct 1 office. This isn't a matter of statutory qualifications. It's only because he's being discussed about being prevented to be allowed to run for sheriff in Montgomery County because he hasn't aligned himself with the faction that's part of this this group. I wanted to play the video for you, which I said, but I'd like to read it to you instead. So just to tell you who these folks are, there's 3 in the podcast, and the link is provided at the bottom. So the gentleman, there's a gentleman, John Boucher, who is kind of leading the discussion. He has been a precinct chair in the past. He's not currently. He claims to be the vice chair of Republican Party in Montgomery County, which I'm sure many of you are aware. We're trying to figure out how to get our party back together in our county. The other gentleman is Walter West, who served as SREC representative previously. He also is not currently serving as a precinct chair. Both those gentlemen have in the past, but are not currently serving. And then there's a lady who lives in Laredo. So John Boucher starts out and he says, well, I guess it was Walter West first, I think is who you hear. And he says, so actually, you kind of drew an alarm when we heard some names there. And John Boucher responds, oh, did I say some names? It must have slipped out. Walter West says, I'm wondering if the former Texas Ranger should know better. And Mr. Boucher responds, you would think. And it's not like he doesn't know. I've contacted him on it and told him about it. And this gentleman wants to be sheriff now. He has filed to run for sheriff. Mr. Boucher says, yes, he has. He has filed to run for sheriff. So my feeling is if he can't be trusted with the lowest political office, why should I give you the most powerful one? Notice, why should I give you? I'll be working against that gentleman. Walter West responds, well, actually, technically, you know what can physically happen now. Doesn't matter if he's running or not. It's up to the Republican Party to let him be a candidate or not. Mr. Boucher responds, that's true. Mr. West says, if he's violated the bylaws as a precinct chair, he is censured. So there's a faction of Montgomery County precinct chairs who have voted now to censure this gentleman, retired Texas Ranger, currently a captain in Constable's office, because he's not part of their group. He is no longer afforded the opportunity to run on the ticket if the group as a whole puts it that way. He would physically possibly have to run as a Democrat, and maybe that's their plan. Laughter ensues at the end. I feel like this is extremely indicative of what is happening in our many of our county parties right now. And the result is that, you know, as serving as a precinct chair, so many people I have conversations with, as was spoken earlier, our biggest challenge is apathy, voter apathy. Either people don't feel like they want to get involved, or they don't feel like they can figure it out because it's so complicated, so ultimately they just don't vote. But the passing of this bill will tighten the regulations for making it very simple to run as a candidate and not allow for additional criteria to be part of filing to run in a primary. So in conclusion, please support this bill, which will protect the rights of your constituents to vote for candidates in primaries without them having to be approved by precinct chairs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your testimony. Members, any questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The chair calls Clark Patterson. Good to see you again, Mr. Patterson. You are Clark Patterson, that's correct?
Yes, sir.
You're here testifying on behalf of the Libertarian Party and yourself, is that right?
That's correct, sir.
And you're against the bill?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, in the interest of time and in the interest of getting to lunch sooner, I'd like to just defer to everything that Mr. Joe White said and the very first speaker also, their opposition to the bill. I concur completely, and they said it better than I can say it.
Well, I appreciate you doing that for us. Members, any questions? Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you.
The chair calls Marco Orantia. Did I get that correct?
Marco Orantia, Chair.
Man, not even close.
It's a Basque last name, so it didn't adopt the Spanish rules, but if you said it right if you're adopting the Spanish rules.
Okay, so what you said, that's your name. That's who you are.
Sure.
Okay, and you're here on behalf of the Texas Democratic Party, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you are on the bill, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, if you would let me, just want to go sort of section by section. So section 1 refers to party affiliation. You affiliate usually with a party in that election year. I don't think that necessarily is an issue. We'd be neutral on that. I'll go and skip to section 4. Already in the election code, it says the very limited amount of things that a filing authority can reject or invalidate a candidate or a filing. So I think this is just underlining or strengthening or clarifying it. So I think this would be fine. We'd be neutral on that. When you're getting to section 5, same thing. That it's just underlining what I think the limited authority, the county chair or the state chair, or the state chair acting for the county chair where there's not a county chair in that county, has a very limited authority to reject someone. So that would be, fine. Section 6 refers to not having a primary committee anymore. This is for conducting a drawing. This is referring to later getting rid of the primary committee. So the county chair or the designee should conduct that drawing. I think we'd be neutral on that. Section 7 refers to what I was talking about, talking about the executive committee not necessarily supervising the overall conduct of the primary election. The county chair already currently is the person who administers, has all the power. They're the primary authority. The CEC, the executive committee, just supervising that. I mean, what does supervising necessarily mean? I mean, are they just sort of watching over them or whatnot? In the end, the county chair is the authority. So I think we'd be neutral on cutting out executive committee over there. I think, probably there'd be members of some county parties that would have an issue with that. But in the end, the county chair that's where the buck stops. Referring to section 8, I think this would already just be consistent with, what's already the case. You do have to, follow the national party rules. And if there's something inconsistent, in particular, this would refer to the presidential and vice presidential nominees. So adding that probably would be an improvement. So that would be fine. Section 9, and maybe I skipped over a section earlier, was talking about getting rid of the primary committee at the county level. That's a body that essentially helps the county chair running the primary. I think that would be fine if we were to get rid of that, because to be honest, working with counties, 200 whatever counties, parties across the state, because in those other ones where we don't have a county chair, of course, the state chair can step in and contract with the elections administrator to run the primary. Basically, in tons of county parties, there's not a primary committee because the county chair is just running it, or in the case of the state chair, there's not one already. If the county chair needs some help to run the primary, I mean, they need to, get some help. So I think taking that out of the code would be fine. So I think we'd be neutral on that. Referring to Section 2 and Section 3, in whatever, the committee substitute that's coming up, I think these would be the two ones that I would, if it was cut out completely, I think it would be fine. I think the intent is just to solidify that there's a very limited authority that the administrator of the primary has in rejecting or throwing out someone of the ballot. That's already listed in the code. So I think just the wording that this has probably has some First Amendment issues. Some examples, in case law would be EU versus San Francisco County Democratic Central Committee, where the Supreme Court held that California's extensive regulation of internal operations of political parties violated members' First Amendment rights and free speech association. Also, the word extensive regulation, I think, limited when necessary makes sense, but, making it extensive a little bit broad, I think we would be careful in those two sections. Another case law example would be Democratic Party of the United States versus Wisconsin, ex rel. Lafayette, where the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that state laws attempting to dictate how delegates vote at national party conventions violates the associational rights of political parties. I think what, I don't want to be getting the author's mind, what maybe you, Mr. Chair, what you were intending to do is to do what you're doing in the rest of the bill, which is just underline the very limited authority the primary administrator has in rejecting or invalidating an application or a candidate. And so, I would just be careful with those two, second and third section.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Burrows.
Yeah, I do have a question. Tell me if this is a fair analysis. I mean, do you interpret what we're doing here as essentially codifying the standard practice of at least the Democrat Party, and I believe the Republican Party has traditionally been as far as ballot access and some of the other things over the last several years?
Yeah, and I would refer to the example the person from the County Chairs Association from the Republican Party said, where, don't want to put it into the hands of the county chair, or like trying to figure out, oh my God, should I be able to, based on some, rule, be able to invalidate this person or reject this ballot? Already what's in the code is very, very clear on those specific reasons. And so muddying the waters is not good, I think, from a county chair's perspective.
From a ballot access standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't want to be able to, and I think we were talking about this on another bill, we don't want to be able to limit the ballot access for anyone that wants to file unless it's for those specific reasons that they can be rejected or invalidated.
But my bill is not trying to change what the norm has been. It's trying to reestablish what the norm is and precedent going forward. That's a fair statement?
Yes, I just think specifically in Section 2 and 3.
I'll address 2 and 3 real quick. I know that you brought up some First Amendment concerns, and I'm not a First Amendment lawyer, but I have somebody here who I think will talk about a newer case that may be out from Utah. I'm probably getting it wrong. I think maybe one of our last witnesses. And we can have that conversation. Certainly anything that we do needs to be, compliant with freedom of association, maybe adding a severability clause to this such that if something does get challenged, it doesn't invalidate the entire statute, but only the part that is. I don't know if I have those concerns, but I'll let the last person who knows a little more about this talk about that and see if we get kind of a meeting of the minds about freedom of association, the basic concepts, because certainly we all respect that and want to be proud of that and make sure that we honor that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Burrows. Thank you, sir, for your testimony. Members, any other questions? Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here.
Likewise.
I'm not picking on her, but the chair calls Christina Atkins. And Ms. Atkins, let me just tell you, As a first-time chair, the reason why I'm calling you up every time is because I've got you listed as testifying, and so I don't want to get in trouble. So if you, so that's the reason why I'm calling you every time. But again, your name is Christina Atkins, and you're testifying on behalf of the Texas Secretary of State's office, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're on the bill, correct?
Yes, sir.
You're here as a resource witness for any questions that we might have.
Absolutely.
Do you have anything you want to share with us, or do you just open up for questions?
I am available for questions.
Members, any questions of our resource witness? Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
I appreciate you. Okay, moving right along, the chair now calls Eric Opiella. Good afternoon, Mr. Opiella. You are Eric Opiella, is that correct?
I am. Mr. Chair, members, I'm Eric Opiella, and
Just one second, Eric, if you don't mind, I'm trying to get the record right here.
Yeah.
I know you would appreciate, you're here testifying on behalf of yourself, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
And you are for the bill, is that correct?
I am, sir.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, members, as I just said, I'm Eric Opiella. I'm a board-certified legislative and campaign attorney and first Republican in Texas to ever be so certified, and a longtime party leader, and I'm testifying in support of House Bill 1635. To address some of the issues that were raised about the constitutional issues that have been raised, the Supreme Court has said, quote, "The freedom to associate is not absolute. Generally, states may regulate political parties, including matters of internal party governance, if the regulation is necessary to the integrity of the political process. If a law imposes only reasonable, non-discriminatory restrictions upon the constitutional rights of parties and voters, and the burden is not substantial or severe, the state's important regulatory interests are generally sufficient to justify the restrictions." And it was Burdick versus Takashi, 504 U.S. 428 in 1992. If a law substantially or severely burdens, this is kind of what was said earlier, the rights of political parties and their members is nonetheless constitutional if it advances a compelling state interest, is narrowly tailored to serve those interests. That's the decision-making framework the Supreme Court has set out. And the more recent pronouncements of the circuit courts and the Supreme Court also make clear that this is the law of the land. In Utah Republican Party versus Cox, it's 892 F3rd 1066 in 2018, the Utah legislature provided that in addition to the party caucus process, a candidate could, like here in Texas, apply for a place on the ballot by petition. The Republican Party announced that they would not allow candidates to apply for a place on the ballot by petition and would only permit nomination by caucus. They proceeded to sue the lieutenant governor, who was the chief elections officer like we have the Secretary of State here in Texas, claiming that allowing candidates to gain ballot access outside the process prescribed in their rules unconstitutionally burdened their freedom of association. The 10th Circuit disagreed, and ultimately the Supreme Court disagreed as well. Citing Burdick, the 10th Circuit said, "It does not follow, however, that the right to vote in any manner and the right to associate for political purposes through the ballot are absolute, or that the state may not pass reasonable, non-discriminatory electoral regulations. The Constitution grants states the right to prescribe the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives." That's in Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. And the Supreme Court has held the states also enjoy similar authority to regulate their own elections within their states. Like in Tassijan versus Republican Party of Connecticut, 479 U.S. 208 in 1986, Supreme Court so held. The court has further recognized that as a practical matter, there must be a substantial regulation of elections if they are to be fair and honest, and if some sort of order rather than chaos is to accompany the democratic process. That was Storer versus Brown, 415 U.S. 724. These regulations, whether they prescribe the time, place, and manner of elections or otherwise provide for orderly selection of the people's representatives, will invariably impose some burden upon individual voters and political parties. These burdens must necessarily accommodate a state's legitimate interest in providing order, stability, and legitimacy to the electoral process. As the Supreme Court said in Timmons versus Twin Cities Area New Party, 520 U.S. 351, it is also clear the states may and inevitably must enact reasonable regulations of parties, elections, and ballots to reduce election and campaign-related disorder. The Supreme Court has recognized that when political parties become involved in a state-administered primary election, the state acquires a legitimate interest in regulating the manner in which that election unfolds. subject only to that same interest balancing that occurs throughout the court's electoral jurisprudence. When the party's actions turn outwards towards the actual nomination and election of an individual who will swear an oath not only to protect the party, but instead to the Constitution, and when the individual ultimately elected has the responsibility to represent all the residents in his or her district, the state acquires a manifest interest in that activity, and the party's interest in such activity must share the stage with the state's manifest interest. That was the ruling of the 10th Circuit in that court case I previously mentioned. The Utah Republican Party petitioned the Supreme Court for review, and the Supreme Court denied their request in 139 Supreme Court 1290 in 2019. This bill is not about who the candidates are. It is about who the deciders are. Is it the members of each party who vote in a primary election, or is it a room of people who have never appeared on a ballot to stand to answer to the grassroots? It allows county chairs and state chairs to do their job without fear of litigation, having to choose between state law and the opinions of others who have said they, not the voters, get to choose. I support House Bill 1635, and I am open for questions.
Mr. Opiello, thank you for your preparation and testimony today. Members, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 1635? If not, the chair recognizes Chairman Burrows to close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, appreciate your time. With that, I close.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Thank you. If there's no objection, House Bill 1635 will be left pending. I hear no objection, so House Bill 1635 is left pending. That is going to conclude our agenda today. I just want to say thank you to the committee for and those who were here to bear witness to the process for kind of powering through the lunch hour here. I apologize, but I felt like it was good to get us out of here and have the witnesses be able to go on about their lives as well. And so at this point, if there's not any other business for the committee to take up, and I'm not hearing any, then the Elections Committee will stand adjourned subject to the call of the chair.